And welcome back to another episode of Cutting Through It. I'm Sherry Brody, and I'm glad you're here. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a client show you a picture of a short haircut or a pixie and immediately thought to yourself, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can do that? Maybe you even passed that client off to another stylist because short hair scares you. Or maybe, and I think a lot of us have probably done this at some point, you've taken the haircut they're showing you and steered them towards something you already know how to do because it feels so much safer. Honestly, I can honestly tell you that the reason that this happens is because a lot of us, they look at the picture that the client is showing them and they're looking at it as a whole haircut and thinking, how in the world am I supposed to recreate that? Because let's face it, we start out and we start learning how to cut hair and we get good at certain haircuts, and that's our arsenal. And so that's what we're good at doing. But what I want to teach you today is I want you to be able to look at a haircut that a client is showing you. And we're going to talk about short haircuts today. And I want you to start looking at it differently because I want you to start breaking down the haircut that you're looking at into a way of being able to create it. Instead of looking at it, I guess what I'm trying to say, instead of looking at it and trying to memorize the haircut, I want to share with you today a way that you can break down what you're seeing. So I want you just for a moment, I want you to imagine as you're listening to this episode that we're going to do today, I want you to imagine that a client is sitting in your chair and she has just pulled out her phone and she shows you a picture of a short haircut. And she says to you, I want this. That's what this episode is about. I'm going to walk you through 3 things that I want you to think about before you even start cutting. And hey, if haircutting is something that you want to feel more confident with, stay with me till the end because I'll also tell you about a resource that I created that can help you take this even further. Hey there, and welcome to Cutting Through It. I'm Sherry Brody. And after more than 40 years working behind the chair, rebuilding my business multiple times, making plenty of mistakes, and learning some hard lessons along the way, I've discovered what really works when it comes to building a successful business working behind the chair. That's what this podcast is all about. This is where I share those lessons with you. All my stories, my successes, my failures, and the things, most of all, that I wish someone had taught me when I was starting out. My hope is that what I've learned can help you avoid some of the struggles I faced, build your business a little faster, and create a career behind the chair that you truly love. So if you're ready to learn from my successes, my mistakes, and everything in between, you're in the right place, my friend. Let's dive in. Okay, the first tip that I'm going to share with you, I want you to start with the client's head shape, not the picture that they're showing you. Before you even decide whether you're going to cut that style, whether you're going to either do the haircut your client is asking for, I want you to take your hands and put them through your client's head. It's so important before you make a decision on whether this haircut is something that is going to be right for them. You need to understand their head shape first, especially with short hair. So let me walk you through that. So your client is sitting in your chair. First thing that I do when I have a client sitting in my chair is I take my hand and I set it on top of their head and I feel their apex. If you're not sure, if you haven't heard of that terminology or you forgot because it's been a while, that's the highest point of the head. And it's so important to know this because if a client is showing you a haircut that has a lot of layers and a lot of fullness in this area, it's super important to know if it's a really high, very like kind of pointy apex, or if it's really, really flat. A clear understanding of how high or how flat the apex is, that's going to help give you a clue on how long or how short those layers can be cut on the top of the head. The next thing you want to do is you want to take your hand and run it down, start from the top of the head, and then you're going to run it to the back of the head and just stop there at that crown area. This is a place you want to feel. Sometimes clients have a really flat crown area, and maybe the haircut that they're showing you is really full there. So that's going to give you a clue there on how much hair length and how much hair you're going to leave in that area. Maybe they have a really small crown area, or maybe it's really wide. Really having a good understanding of that area of the head is going to really determine for you on whether the style that they're showing you, if their head shape is going to be able to handle that particular haircut. The other thing is you want to pull the hair apart there and look at the growth patterns. Usually in the crown area, there's a lot of calyx there. The hair swirls and goes in a lot of different directions. And it's really important to really know that before you even start a haircut, because sometimes if we are not aware of how prominent the crown is or how flat it is, or if there's a lot of calyx in there, it's very easy to go in and cut that hair too short. And then once that's cut on a short haircut, as you all know, it's cut and it's gone. But when you take the time to really feel that part of the head shape, it gives you a clue on that. Like maybe I need to leave the hair a little bit longer here and create some internal support to help create that volume. Or it's really a very kind of a pointy occipital bone. And so I can make it a little bit shorter there. That's all going to be determined, on your their desired outcome that they have. But taking the time to feel that gives it's almost like you're your detective agent. You're going through and you're investigating the head shape to see if the haircut that they're wanting, if number one, it's going to work, but number two, on helping yourself be able to achieve it and understand what you need to do to be able to achieve it. Okay. So then now once we get past the crown area, then you want to take your hand and rub it, go down farther toward the nape and stop at the occipital bone. This bone is so important when it comes to a short haircut. So many times we'll see a beautiful pixie cut. I know you can relate to that, where you're walking down the grocery store and you see this person with this beautiful haircut and it's just a head turner. And so I have found myself in the grocery store turning and following somebody just to get a look at that haircut because the haircut was so beautiful. And a lot of times a really beautiful short haircut, a pixie cut that's cut super short, a lot of times it's really pretty with that silhouette shape because that client has a really strong occipital bone. And so it gives that beautiful shape naturally. But a lot of times clients may have a flat occipital bone. Maybe it doesn't curve really well. So if you take your hand and you rub it over the occipital bone and start to move it down into the nape area, it helps give you a feel on how prominent that occipital bone is. If I run it over my client's back of the head shape and it's got a nice curve, then I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. But sometimes I'll run it down the back of the head and it's really flat. And so what that tells me that if this client is showing me a picture of a haircut that has a beautiful silhouette shape like that, then it tells me that if I'm going to create that, I'm going to have to add a bit of graduation here so that I can create the roundness. Do you see what I'm saying here? What I want to share, what I really want you to take away from this episode of me explaining this to you is that when you're looking at a haircut that someone's showing you, instead of just looking at it whole as a haircut, you want to look at it and break it down into the 3 different techniques of haircutting. And by understanding the head shape, it helps you understand which technique you're going to have to place on which part of the head to create the shape that they're asking you for. So far, we've ran our hand over the apex, the top of the head, to see how high or how flat that is, to determine if we're going to add layers at all, how short those layers are going to be, then running it through the crown area, moving back to the top back of the head. We're trying to feel how wide or how flat, how much calyx and movement is going on there in the crown area to determine how we're going to place those layers. And then we're moving it down, our hand down over to the occipital bone to see how prominent that is, to determine on, are we just going to layer the hair really close to the head because she's got a beautiful shape, or do we need to create that beautiful shape by adding graduation? And then the next thing is to take your hands and on either side of the head and start at the apex and just bring it down to their ears and feel the side of the head. This is called the parietal ridge. And what I mean by that is that this is the widest part of the head. Some people have a very flat side of the head. So if they're showing you a haircut that's got some roundness to it, and honestly, most haircuts that are short, that are Pixie haircuts, they've got some roundness to them. And by taking the time to feel the head shape ahead of time, some people, their head has just naturally got a nice roundness to it. So you won't have to do a whole lot. But those clients that have a flatter side to it, and they really don't have a real wide roundness there on the parietal ridge, we've got to create that. And how do we create width in a haircut? We create it by graduation. So the next thing on the head shape that you want to pay attention to is you want to make sure that you look at the hairline all the way around. Since we're at the occipital bone, we finished there, I would have the client kind of look down a little bit and pull the hair up and look at the hairline. This is a huge one on short hair because sometimes the hair is not as thick there. So you need to be checking the density of the hair to see if they're showing you a picture of a haircut that's got this, some hair that's maybe flippy in the nape, or it just looks nice and thick as it lays against the neck. If you don't pay attention to that and you just start cutting it, it can look very stringy on a client that doesn't have a lot of density of hair. The other thing you want to look for is growth patterns there. Is there calyx? Sometimes there's calyx, or sometimes there's a hairline that maybe grows sideways to one side. I've seen it all in my career. So it's really important to pay attention to that nape area because that's going to give you another clue on where to guide them as far as what's going to work for them. And honestly, as you're working your way and doing this, a little side note, explaining that to your client, it makes such a big difference on their confidence level in you as a hairstylist. I can't tell you how many clients have said, wow, I didn't know that about my hair. Thanks for sharing that. It just makes them feel so much more seen. The other thing you want to look for is the hair on a short haircut, where the hairline meets to the ear. We call this the mastoid process, and that's the space between the ear and the hairline. That's a really big place that you don't want to overlook when you're cutting a short haircut, because if somebody has either the hair is very wide there and you go and you don't realize that, you could cut a hole there and it could change the whole vibe of the haircut. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you could have a client that has really thick hair and it grows right up to the ear. And so some of the haircut that they might be asking you for, it needs to be adjusted for them. And by you investigating this, it's going to help you decide on how short or how long you'll leave it there. Make sure you also go around to the front of the head and look at the front area, where the fringe is. This is your frontal bone. How prominent is it? Do they have a big forehead? I have a forehead you could ski off of, so I have to have either no bangs or long bangs. I call it bangs or fringe, depends on where you're at. But that's a really important place to look. And also around the hairline down to the ear. This is a really important place to look because either around the hairline, it's going to be a lot finer hair, or the client could have, this is where we have recession areas. So you want to make it work for that. I have a client that comes to my mind. We do a beautiful short haircut on her, and her picture she had showed me to begin with was just a short pixie haircut. It was darling. But upon looking at her frontal bone, she had like a really big forehead and her hair wasn't as thick. So what we ended up doing was kind of creating a longer, it was short on the crown, and we created some disconnection. I created some layers in there so she'd have pop, but I kept it long in the front and did kind of an asymmetrical fringe. So it was a little bit of a disconnection. So those layers kind of laid on top of the longer hair in the front, and it just came out just really darling. She ended up parting off onto the side, and we left it longer in front, and it worked beautifully for her. And I share that with you because what she came in with, first of all, the picture, had I just gone from that picture and not done some investigative work, she wouldn't have been happy. So why the head shape matters so much and why I'm sharing this with you is because I feel like this is where a lot of hairstylists fail when it comes to cutting short hair. And when you make one mistake and make one person unhappy, it's so horrible. And that's where we never want to go through that again. I know you can relate to that if that's happened to you. And a lot of times this is where the mistake happens to begin with. This is where it happens because the stylist did not take the time to check the head shape underneath and to really investigate before diving into that haircut. So taking the time to do this is going to save you so many headaches, and it's going to really help bolster your confidence when it comes to cutting hair and communicating with your clients on whether they can have that haircut and helping you guide them into a haircut that's going to work best for them with confidence. So this is where I want to remind you of something, that there is only 3 ways to cut hair. Only 3 ways to create that shape that haircut has. And that is either you're going to cut one length, graduation, or layers. So I share this with you because instead of trying to memorize a haircut, you need to ask yourself these questions. Where am I seeing graduation? Next tip is now we're going to look at the picture and we're going to break it apart. So I want you to look at the photo a little bit differently. I want you to not look at the picture and think, how do I cut that haircut? I want you to start asking yourself questions. How short is this hair in the nape? How short is it around the ears? Where is the weight of this haircut sit, meaning the roundness of it? Is there fullness above the ear? If there is, how high above the ear does it sit? Is there fringe or there bangs? Is it long or is it short? Is the crown short and layered or longer? So you got to really look at that in that haircut. And how much length is on the top. Sometimes we can look at a short haircut and it's like really short on the sides and the nape, but the top has these long, beautiful layers. And sometimes they're just really short. And so by looking at this picture and really breaking it apart in your head first, it really helps you. So this is where I want to remind you of something. Because instead of memorizing a haircut, you need to go back to the fundamentals of haircutting. There's only 3 ways to cut hair and create the shape that clients are asking you for. And that is one length, graduation, and layers. So instead of trying to memorize a haircut, you need to be asking yourself, like, where am I seeing graduation? Where am I seeing layers? Where am I seeing any one length in this haircut, if any? And by the way, if this is the part of haircutting that you struggle with, really understanding layering, graduation, and how they create the shape. This is exactly what I teach inside my Cutting with Confidence course. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to look at it. Let me give you a little example. So like if I'm looking at a haircut and if the nape is super short, but there's this beautiful rounded shape and fullness above the ears, I'm thinking graduation. Where does that graduation need to live? And how much weight do I need? And where does that weight need to sit? And this is where understanding your head shape and what you're working on is going to help you decide that. This is where you start asking yourself, can I create this shape on the head that's actually sitting in my chair? You don't want to just copy the picture. So another thing I want to point out here too is to make sure you stand back behind her and look at her in the mirror, pull the hair back away from her face and really get a good look at her face shape. Look at her features and decide where you want fullness and where you need to remove fullness to enhance her features. And, what parts of her face do you want to enhance? Where do you want, when somebody looks at that client and they look at that haircut, where do you want the eye to go? This is honestly where, when you take the time to investigate and really understand these things, this is where you become creative. And this is where people will start noticing your work. So I'm going to encourage you here to stop trying to memorize a haircut. Learn how to see the shapes and techniques that created them. The last tip is to really take into consideration the texture, the density, and the movement of the hair, the fabric that you're working on. What this is going to help determine is how you are going to create that haircut. And what I'm talking about here is mainly our tools. So, for example, you could have two clients bring in the exact same picture, but you're not necessarily going to create that cut exactly the same way. So what are we looking for? With the texture, you're looking for how straight is the hair? How is it coarse? Is it curly? Does it have wave to it? Or is it really, really fine? Then, of course, you're going to look at the density. How thick is it? And in what areas of the head? A lot of times you're going to find that somebody's, maybe really, really thick in the back, right at the occipital bone area and below the crown, but really like fine and thin toward the nape and around the face. The next one is you want to look at the movement. We talked about this a little earlier. Look for calyx, strong growth patterns. What is the natural direction that the hair wants to grow? These are all things you need to take into consideration before you decide on a final cut. And if they can have the inspiration photo that they want, or if you need to change it up a little bit and adjust it into a style that's going to work for them. An example would be somebody with really thick, dense hair. They may need some weight removed to be able to get the pieciness and the space they want within the haircut. Or somebody that has a strong growth pattern, you may need to leave a little bit more length in that area in order to help control it. Maybe they have a difficult hairline around the frontal bone and they want this, they're showing you a picture of this cute, piecey, fringy, short fringe area. You're going to have to adjust it a little bit because they're not going to be able to have that because of their growth pattern. I've said this to you before. You kind of got to think of yourself as the leader of their hair journey. And when you take the time to do this, your clients are going to be so much more open to the things that you do recommend. When we're talking about the type of tools that we're going to use, like for instance, if I have a client that has really straight, coarse hair, and they're showing me like a haircut that is very soft and feminine and piecey, and it's got some roundness to it, and I need to create some movement, I'm going to reach for my razor because a razor is almost like carving soap. I can just create that shape that I want, of course, by using graduation and layering in the right manner, but I'm using a tool that's going to encourage the hair to want to move and to create that softness. Whereas if I have somebody with really fine hair and I want to create a little bit more strength to the haircut, then I'm going to use my shears. And the way I use them, my shears is going to make an impact as well. So if I have somebody that has really fine hair that's straight, that tends to show every cut line, I'll probably do a lot of point cutting. And on the other end of the spectrum, if the hair is really thick, I may need to use a texture shear to remove some weight. So you just want to look at the picture, the inspiration photo that they're showing you. It gives you an idea of what your client wants. It gives you a destination. But by taking the time to really knowing the head shape, looking at the texture of the hair, looking at the thickness of the hair and the growth patterns, it really helps you have the confidence to determine, number one, on whether their inspiration photo that they're bringing you can actually be done on their head. And number two, what you can do on their head. The client's hair, their head shape, it determines everything on whether you can and how you're going to achieve it. So my whole point to this whole episode is I want to talk to you stylists that are afraid of cutting short hair. I hope that these 3 tips that I'm sharing with you, like really taking the time to discover the head shape that you're working on, ask yourself that when they show you that picture, instead of going right to being afraid, ask yourself, what head shape am I working on? Okay, you got to feel the head shape. That's going to give you a lot of clues. And then the second one is, what techniques do I need to achieve the shape of this haircut that I'm seeing? So you want to think in your head, what kind of shape is it? Is it round? Is it more triangular? Is it more square? And how am I going to achieve that shape? By which technique I'm going to use? Is it either going to be one length? Is it going to be graduation? Is it going to be layers? And where on the head shape am I going to use those techniques? And then what does this client's texture, density, and growth patterns tell me that I need to do in order to create the look that they're wanting? What tools do I need to use? What techniques do I need to use? All that stuff makes the biggest impact on your confidence as a hairstylist on whether, number one, you can do that haircut, number two, on how to achieve the haircut, number three, and most importantly, on creating a haircut that's going to make that client happy and one that's going to give you reviews and one that's going to return time and time again. And most importantly, when you take the time to do all these things, you create consistency in your work, and it's something that clients can depend on. And that's when it opens up the world where you can charge top dollar for your work, because clients will pay for knowledge and they pay for quality. When you stop trying to memorize haircuts and start understanding why you're doing what you're doing, that's when cutting starts becoming a whole lot less scary. And that's when the scare is replaced with confidence. If a client showing you a haircut you've never done before makes you nervous, or you find yourself sticking to the same few haircuts because those are the ones you know you can do, you don't need another haircut to memorize. What you need is to understand the foundations of haircutting well enough to look at a shape and know how to create it. That's exactly what I teach inside Cutting with Confidence, so you can stop second guessing yourself and start trusting your skills behind the chair. If that sounds like where you are right now, check the show notes and take a look at Cutting with Confidence. I'll see you in the next episode. I hope this episode encouraged you today and reminded you that you're not alone behind the chair. And if it helped you, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with another hairstylist who may need encouragement too. And remember, success behind the chair is built one client, one conversation, and one day at a time. I'll see you guys in the next episode.